Welcome to another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at something that I think is probably influencing all of us more than we realize.
Mm,
And that is how media, especially social media, shapes our desires and decisions.
yeah, definitely. And we're going to be looking at some really interesting ideas about this.
Okay.
Starting with this idea of instruments of unification from a paper.
Instruments of unification, huh?
Yeah,
That's an intense.
it analyzes the work of Guy Debord,
Okay.
who was a philosopher who really looked at how media affects us.
All right, so break it down for me. Break it down for our listener, too.
Sure.
What is instruments of unification? What is Debord getting at here?
So essentially, Debord is arguing that the spectacle, so if you think all the media that we consume every day,
Right.
isn't just entertainment.
Okay.
It actually becomes a part of society and a really powerful tool for unifying our thoughts
Interesting.
and even our actions.
So it's not just about passively watching, but it's about shaping how we see the world.
Yeah, exactly. And the paper actually uses the Kardashians as an example.
Okay.
Um, if you think about it,
Yeah.
millions of people see them wearing or using certain products, and then all of a sudden, those products become must-haves.
Right.
And so their influence kind of sets the standard for what's considered beautiful or desirable, and it really drives consumption on a massive scale.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed that, like, after you see an influencer wearing something, you start to think, like, huh, maybe I need that too?
Oh, all the time. Yeah,
It's really subtle, but it's definitely there.
definitely. Yeah. And it actually goes beyond just clothes or makeup.
Mhm.
Media imbues all sorts of products with like a deeper meaning.
Okay.
Neil Postman called this a symbolic code in his book, The Age of Show Business.
I see.
And so, for example, a luxury car isn't just a car.
Right.
It represents wealth and success.
It's a status symbol.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the media creates these associations, which makes us desire certain things, often without even realizing why.
So we're being sold a lifestyle, a vision of who we could be through these products.
Yeah, precisely.
Huh. Interesting.
And the really fascinating part is how this influence spreads beyond just the initial message from the media.
Okay.
So remember that theory we talked about, the two-step flow from Elihu Katz?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Okay, so it's not just the media directly influencing us, right?
Right.
There's like another step involved.
Okay.
It's like a chain reaction.
Okay.
So first, the media influences key figures,
Mm-hmm.
what Katz called opinion leaders,
Okay.
and then their influence spreads through social networks.
Got it.
So the Kardashians, for instance,
Yeah.
they would be considered opinion leaders
Mm.
because they have this massive audience, right?
Right.
And then their followers will share their content, and that essentially turns everyday users into,
And a little mini influencers.
yeah, well, maybe not salespeople, but definitely spreaders of the message
Spreaders the message, yeah.
embedded in those products.
I like that. Spreaders on the message. Yeah.
So it's like a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
It starts with the media, and then it spreads through all these networks of people that we trust,
Mm-hmm.
and then that ultimately unifies our choices.
Right.
Makes us feel like we're all in on the same trend.
Yeah.
Like we all need those same sneakers, that same phone.
Exactly.
It's like we're all part of this giant club that we didn't even sign up for.
You're exactly right.
Wow.
It's like a shared experience.
Yeah.
It creates this sense of belonging, but
Okay.
the big question is, how much of what we see online is actually real?
That's a great question.
And how much of it is shaping our own sense of reality?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Because it's like we're constantly surrounded by all these carefully crafted images and messages,
Right.
but are we getting the whole picture?
Right. And that's where Postman's idea of technology creating a social setting comes in.
Okay.
He uses this really interesting example of
Right.
a Mercedes-Benz commercial.
So let's say the commercial shows this sleek Mercedes, and there's this successful looking person behind the wheel,
Mm-hmm.
maybe someone attractive in the passenger seat. Like, what message is that sending, even without explicitly saying it?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's implying that owning that car is somehow tied to success,
Right.
to a certain lifestyle,
Exactly.
even if they never say those words.
Mhm.
It's all about the image, the feeling that they're projecting.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And this is where media really starts to go beyond just reflecting reality
Mm-hmm.
and starts to shape our desires and expectations.
Right.
We see this vision of success that's been carefully constructed,
Yeah.
and then it influences our choices, even if we don't realize it's happening.
Right. And it's like, it's almost like the media sets the stage for how we think things should be. what a successful person should look like,
Right.
how they should act, what they should own.
Right.
It's like a blueprint for our own aspirations. Wow. Yeah, it's fascinating how these like subtle messages can really get in our heads,
Yeah.
shape our desires and influence our choices. You mentioned another thinker earlier.
Yeah.
I think it was Walter Lippmann,
Yes.
who also explored this idea of like perception versus reality.
Yeah. So Lippmann wrote about the difference between like the public self and the private self,
Okay.
and how the images that we see in media often present a really carefully curated version of reality.
Right. It's like the perfect version.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like if you think about reality shows or even like sitcoms,
Yeah.
it's like they rarely reflect the messiness
yeah.
of everyday life.
No, they don't.
Right. So true.
Yeah.
And yet, even though we know it's not totally real, we still internalize those images.
Right.
It shapes how we think people are supposed to act, like in different roles, even professions, like
Yeah.
how scientists behave in movies
Yeah.
versus how they actually behave in real life. Yeah, it's interesting to think about how those like portrayals might shape our expectations.
Well, that's the power of those instruments of unification that Debord was talking about.
Okay.
They create a shared understanding, even if it's based on like a slightly distorted or like idealized version of reality.
Right. So it's like we're all kind of on the same page, but it's like
Yeah.
a fake page,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
a constructed page.
Yeah. We might all be picturing the same perfect family dinner, even though most of us know.
That doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah, those perfect family dinners rarely exist.
Well,
It makes you wonder, are we all being subtly influenced in the same way?
Yeah.
Even if we think we're being critical about what we're consuming, like, are we all being tricked by the same illusions?
it's a really provocative question, and it leads to a really important point.
Yeah.
If media has this power to shape our perceptions,
Right.
who is shaping the media itself?
Ooh,
What are their agendas?
that's a good question.
And how much awareness do we have of those influences?
Whoa. Yeah, that's like another layer to all of this. It's not just about being aware of the messages,
Right.
but understanding like the forces behind those messages.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that like the information we consume isn't just random.
Right.
It's often carefully crafted and strategically disseminated.
Right.
And it's up to us to be aware of those agendas
Yeah.
and think critically about what we're being sold.
So we can't just be passive consumers anymore.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
We need to be active participants, like questioning what we see,
Right.
thinking about the messages,
Okay.
making conscious choices
Yeah.
about how we want to be influenced.
Absolutely. It's about taking ownership of our own media consumption and recognizing that we have a choice
Right.
in how we let it shape us.
That brings us back to Debord's idea of these instruments of unification, right? You
Right.
mentioned the paper's conclusion highlights how deeply these influences can affect us. What's the key takeaway there?
It's not just about buying the right products
Right.
or fitting into a certain image. It goes much deeper than that.
Okay.
These influences can actually shape our sense of self.
Wow. So it's not just about how we see the world around us. It's about how we see ourselves in relation to that world
Exactly.
and how media can really affect that self-perception.
Precisely. And that's where the listener should get a bit introspective.
Yeah.
Think about it this way. How is media shaping your thoughts, your desires, your sense of self?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It's almost like we need to develop a sort of media literacy, a way to decode those messages
I like that.
and understand their potential impact on us.
Yeah, developing that media literacy is crucial. Because, I mean, we can't escape media entirely.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, yeah.
We can't get away from it.
But we can be aware of its power, and we can choose to engage with it consciously and critically.
Okay. So much of what we've been talking about, like, it feels almost subconscious, like these ways that media messages really seep into our thinking, but it feels like being more aware of those influences,
Right.
Developing that media literacy that you mentioned is a good first step
Yeah.
in reclaiming some of our own agency.
It really is, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not about, like, rejecting media entirely.
Right.
It's about engaging with it in a more mindful and empowered way.
Yeah.
It's like you wouldn't eat just anything you find.
Hey,
right?
no, that's true.
You'd want to know, like, where your food came from.
Right.
What ingredients are in it.
Right, exactly.
Consuming media can be kind of like that.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. I like that.
Yeah.
We need to be more discerning about what we feed our minds. So how do we actually do that?
Right.
How do we start to navigate this world of media more consciously?
I think it really starts with asking questions. Like,
Right.
who created this message?
Right.
What's their purpose?
Yeah.
What are they trying to sell me?
Yeah.
Literally or figuratively.
Right.
And how does this message make me feel?
Yeah.
Does it resonate with my values?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it make me feel pressured to conform to someone else's idea of who I should be?
Yeah, those are really good questions to keep in mind.
Yeah.
I think it's really easy to just kind of scroll passively.
Right.
But I think when we start to dig a little deeper,
Yeah.
question the motives,
Mm.
that's when we can start to break free from that feeling of being, you know, like unified
Yeah.
in a way that we didn't even realize was happening, you know?
Exactly. It's about recognizing that you have a choice.
Right.
You have the power to decide what messages you let in and how you let them affect you.
This has been a really eye-opening conversation.
Yeah.
We started with the Kardashians
Mm.
and luxury cars, but we've really gone so much deeper than that, you know, like
Sure.
from the nature of reality to the power dynamics at play in media.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a lot to think about.
It really is. And I think the main takeaway here is that we all have a responsibility to be
Yeah.
critical consumers of media,
Mhm.
and not just for our own well-being,
Right.
but for the health of our society.
Right, of course.
Because if media can unify us,
Yeah,
it can also divide us.
absolutely.
And it's up to us to be aware of those forces
Mm-hmm.
and make informed choices about how we participate.
Absolutely. And that is such a powerful thought to leave us with.
Yeah.
We have covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
A lot.
Thank you so much for being such a great guide.
Oh, of course. It's been my pleasure.
And to our listener, I hope this conversation has inspired you to look at the media you consume in a new way.
Yes.
Start asking those questions, challenge those assumptions, and remember, you have the power to decide
Yeah,
how media shapes your world.
absolutely.